to imperialism, in opposition to the bourgeois state, in opposition to the bourgeois nation, etc. And that is the process that's going on, right now, even though it is not necessarily conscious of itself as that process. And so we have the basis in history. Right now, we have the advent, we are convinced, the conditions for the advent of socialism, like as a world economy.
I hope this is a significant question. It's actually based on what we were just talking about. You were just talking about maybe more specifically. I'm curious about how this movement figures in the rest of the world. I understand how it figures in the rest of the world because you just explained it. But in terms of the relationship, but maybe more specifically strategically, and I don't mean even necessarily wars like the warring countries like Iraq and Afghanistan or even Venezuela, the countries that are resisting, that have a heavy resistance, but maybe more like Southeast Asia, those countries or other countries, and maybe more specifically how they figure in. I hope that's significant.
Give me some examples.
So Indonesia, for instance, where there's a mass of people that don't necessarily, and I might be ignorant about if they have a heavy resistance, but as far as I know, they aren't necessarily, involved in a concrete, resistance against capitalism. But I mean, in terms of maybe unity, more specifically, I'm talking about maybe how the movement, regards, allying with them.
Well, the struggle is, I mean, like we are ideologically committed to unity with all the forces struggling against imperialism, including those who are struggling against Indonesia, who functions as a kind of imperialist outpost that occupies places like Eastern Timor and other areas in that region. So if we see that the trajectory, we believe that human progress today is ensconced in all these movements for national liberation. That is where progress is. And so we have a unity in principle with all the legitimate struggles for national liberation and all the struggles against imperialism. And I make a distinction. I said for national liberation. I also said against imperialism. Because the Iranians do not suffer national oppression from an external force, but they are engaged in the struggle against imperialism, one. The other thing I want to say is this, that capitalism came about in the world not through setting up factories all over the world, etc. Do you know what I mean? Like, every place was not Manchester, right? But it dominates as the world economy. So I'm suggesting to you that the resources in Africa, human and material, and the resources of Africa, human and material, which are spread around the world, conscious of, and these are conscious resources, of the responsibility to lead struggles for national liberation and socialism, have the ability of changing the whole world and the world economy. It doesn't have to capture power everywhere all of a sudden to become a decisive factor in how the world economy will act and will look. Just as it played such an important role in the advent of capitalism itself, and it is so significant in the continuing function of capitalism, in terms of petroleum resources, other kind of mineral resources, human labor, agricultural capacity, and things like that. And you think about a population of 1.5 billion folks spread around the world, located in some of the most strategic places in the world, to capture power and to control Africa, just Africa. In terms of all those resources in Africa now under control, and a socialist entity would take power there, it can change the nature of the world economy. That's what I'm saying. It becomes a central factor in changing the nature of the world economy and defining how everything has to happen in relationship to it. Yeah. Uhuru. Yeah.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, come back.
Thank you for that tremendous analysis. I know we're running short of time, so I don't want to belabor anything, but it's interesting about national consciousness. I saw the new replacement for Larry King, Piers Morgan, interviewed Alec Baldwin, the actor. Alec Baldwin wants to get into politics to correct the miscommunication of the liberal side that Obama has. But he said this, he said that, you know, he asked him, why is he getting into public service? He said, well, I'm an older man. I can no longer join the military and drop bombs in Pakistan. So now I want to become, you know, into politics. So clearly the liberal side or the reactionary conservative side, they have the interest. They're very clear about that, actually. So, but my question is this: given your point about the sort of former, I would say, former declared socialist nations like China or Vietnam or as you say, Brazil and some others struggling, is there going to be a difference in terms of, or what can you discuss maybe the difference between given that they're uniting with the imperialism and all the structures of capitalism that are becoming worldwide financial structures, whatever, the integration of that that's being achieved. What do you think the difference is between, if any, between struggling with imperialism in those countries, or in relation to those countries, versus the European capitals and the American capitals, the sort of the bastions, the birthplaces of capitalism? Is there a significant difference in how that works?
I think there probably is a significant difference. And I think this, again, is independent of the will of those who now have power there. But I also suspect, and this is purely speculation, that there is a difference in the attitude of the Vietnamese toward capitalism and imperialism than the Chinese. Although what I am sure of is that in both instances, they have as a major objective the industrialization of the country to remove themselves out of poverty. Except China in particular, and I mention China because it's not like Vietnamese, the Vietnam. People were excited about Vietnam and supportive of Vietnam, but Vietnam is a tiny country. It's not like the Vietnamese were sending revolutionaries around the world or were even attempted to lead the anti-imperialist or communist movement around the world. China played that role. And at one point, China and the Soviet Union were two poles, if you will, in an internationalist movement that was trying to lead the revolutionary process. But the thing is that the emergence of China in particular as a serious contender with U.S. and European imperialism, to the point that we've been watching all this drama that's happening, you know, like in that era, the Korea question, that people call the Korea question, which is really the U.S. Trying to come up with any issue, anything it can, to justify massive deployment of military forces in that area to try and contain China. And then China's response by showing that it's got stealth fighters that you didn't know anything about, you know, that you were talking about how long it was going to take for all of this to happen. There is a serious contest, and China is determined to replace the U.S. as the major force there. It is determined. That's one of the reasons why, as rough as it may get, I have all kinds of doubts about the ability of the United States to attack Korea. It's one of the reasons. I mean, it doesn't say anything about the love that may or may not exist between the People's Democratic Republic of Korea or China. But that concession to imperialist hegemony, European or American hegemony, is not something that I can't imagine China being able to do that. If you remember, the reasons there are two Koreas today is because the Chinese came across the Chinese border and stopped the imperialists and pushed them back across the yellow, and that's where the so-called peace thing, you know, not peace, but what do they call it? The armistice came about. Is that what they characterize as armistice? There's no so-called, the war was never officially ended, but the Chinese are the ones who did that. So what I'm saying is that how this whole imperialist thing is working out today, you find, and one of the reasons for the economic crisis, we talk about the growing struggles of the oppressed peoples around the world being factors, But part of that represents itself even as countries like China, India, and all these other countries now vying for some of the resources that the European imperialists, American imperialists used to have for themselves. And changing the rules of the game and making and upping the ante. It's like the new guy moved in the neighborhood and began gentrifying all over Africa. That makes it hard now for the imperialists got to pay more for what they want because they have the people are playing China against them, etc. So there's that contest that's there. And in that mix, there's also the capitalist relationships inside China that's driving, I mean, I forgot how many thousands of demonstrations and mobilizations happen on a regular basis in China by peasants and workers who don't like what the hell is going on there. And, you know, if I can still, you know, have a memory of the significance of Mao Zedong, I just know that in China that there are people, you know, who are using that as, that's the quote-unquote father of the nation, Mao Zedong, you know, and so you got a lot of hustlers there because anytime you introduce capitalism into a place that did not, where it didn't exist before and people grab into, you see the ruthless hustling and ostentatious wealth and stuff like that is there on the one hand, but there are also a lot of disenchanted people who are struggling, who also, here's another factor though, they have also suffered a certain kind of national humiliation. Now, national humiliation at the hands of the West, and so, and there's a way that they're proud of all the achievements. China sends up you know, a satellite and stuff like that, and everybody's watching, happy to see that kind of thing, but there's also deep struggle inside China. And so I think that's going to play a role, and I think that's going to deepen and sharpen, because and it's going to sharpen even as this process of contest between all these contending imperial forces now. So I think it's going to make a difference. I can't, you know, obviously we don't have, you know, like, you know, crystal balls and stuff like that. And I think Vietnam, which has an amazing history of resistance and is really kind of quiet. It's doing a lot of stuff to try to, you know, industrialize and build up the economy and what have you. I don't know that much about the character of the party in Vietnam, you know, now, but I put Vietnam and some of these emerging countries, I hate that term. I put Vietnam and particularly China. I don't put Brazil in the same camp at this time in terms of what I think the potential is for, you know, rapid revolutionary transformation under certain, you know, conditions. I don't think that you're going to see even capitalist development in China. I think there's going to be a rocky road. I think workers and peasants have yet to express themselves in a way that's going to help to define it. But I think there's going to be a difference. How that difference articulates itself is going to be interesting to see. Yeah. I think there are even bases for China and Vietnamese, even the China and Vietnam that seems to be in the capitalist camp, to find some unity with struggles in their contention with the U.S. And there, I think that there are circumstances under which they can find unity with struggles of African people here or other places. I mean, this is the U.S. and all of Europe that held up this so-called dissident and gave him the Nobel Peace Prize to try to undermine China. That's what it was about. I mean, this guy might have been wonderful hell, but they didn't have to go to China to find somebody who was exploited. They could have gone to one of the prisons right here in this country, all of them, you know, for that matter. But it was trying to undermine China. And so it's going to be an interesting kind of development, I think, you know. Uhuru. Yeah.
I think that we could take 2 more questions because we have...
Because I talked too long.
No. I wish we had made more time. Maybe 2 more questions. Okay. Thank you.
Uhuru.
I hate to cut this off.
Uhuru, that's right, yeah.
I think I really appreciate this as well, and I feel like I missed a couple really important points, and I was hoping you could just reiterate them. You were talking about
I
the
might not have known what the hell I was talking about at that point, but go ahead.
Oh, I was like, you said something, I kept thinking, I zoned out, and I came back